Yes, long time no see. Long time no see. I'm Keenan. We are listening to Top to Bottom. Becc, it's been 3 weeks. Is that how long it's taken you to wash your hair?
Yeah. Exposed. Yeah.
Exposed. How was the marathon, Becc?
So good. Thanks for asking.
Proud of you, Becc. Very proud of you.
Thank you.
Very proud of you. For those of you who don't know, Becc ran the New York Marathon in 3 hours and 56 minutes. She beat her 55, 54.
47.
47. She beat her goal by 13 minutes. She was flying. She got a ticket. She was running so fast. She got a speeding ticket.
It was the best experience of my life.
And that, considering she spent 3 weeks with me on a bus, that's saying a lot. That is saying a lot. I mean, that's some tall order.
Okay, we're on to the very first segment of the Top to Bottom podcast, which is
Email Teardown.
This is the segment where we tear down emails that were sent to Becc and Keenan. Let's go on to email number 1. This one says, I had a great time yesterday afternoon with my friend, Jeff Goins, and a few hundred attendees as we talk about how to write a best-selling book. Jeff personally walked me through the process of my first book, You Are the Brand, and his advice was invaluable. We're putting up the replay to the training for a short time, and if you have any questions about the webinar or about the special boot camp Jeff and I are hosting later this month, drop me a line by replying to this email. Enjoy, Mike.
Keenan. This was to me, right?
This was to you, Keenan.
Yeah,
and by the way, it didn't have a intro, hi, Keenan, or anything. It just went straight to the body.
Went straight to it. So I don't even have to say very much on why this is an absolutely pathetic email, right? They clearly don't know their audience. I clearly got caught up in spam. Their assumption is because I wrote a book, or maybe they think I want to write a book. I don't know. But what is the whole thing based on, men? What is the whole thing based on?
The whole thing is based on assuming that you would want to watch it.
No, man, you're killing me. Becc, I should have asked you the question. What's the email based on?
That you want to write a book.
What type of book? It says in there. What type of book?
A best-selling book.
A best-selling book.
Which you already have.
A best-selling book. So they're trying to pitch me on how to write a best-selling book. And so number 1, do I even want to write the best-selling book? And number 2, I have a best-selling book. So they're not even acknowledging how they're defining best-selling and how somehow they're going to provide value to me. So when I read this with my, conceited little self, it's like, I already have a best-selling book. What value do you bring to me at all? After that, I don't have to say another thing. There's just nothing else to say, so I'm not even going to try.
What about you, Becc? What do you think about this email?
Yeah, well, apart from the relevance of all of it, I mean, the interesting thing is it's like an insult to Keenan, meaning like sending that as an insult because of not even recognizing that he has a book. But I'd say from a technique perspective, the email is readable aesthetically. I do read it. That's the upside to it. I'd say from a technical perspective, there's no CTA. I have no idea what you want me to do or why you want me to do it or why that's a good idea for me is my biggest, given from a technical perspective is there's no CTA. There's no clear CTA at all of what he should do.
Okay, on to email number 2. This one was a LinkedIn message sent to Becc. And it says, software development company. Hi, Becc. Are you looking for software development company? I am from Blank Software from Hyderabad. We develop various kinds of software, include web, mobile, and standalone. I can give you a best deal on both quality and pricing part. Can we connect and discuss further on the same? Here's our website. Becc, what do you think about this one?
Well, I'm going to dig into something that I haven't dug into before. The most egregious thing to me in this email is he says, are you looking for a company? So he's banking on the fact where most sellers are. They're banking on the fact that you're already in market, that you've already identified a problem, you've already self-prescribed, that you need a solution and that solution is a software developer. So from a high level, that's, I think, the thing that's hurting him the most is he's going after a market. He's hoping to run into a market that already is in market. So it's not creating demand. It's just attracting pre-existing demand that already exists, which has to be a numbers game.
Okay, what about you, Keenan? What do you think? Do you agree?
I'm going to do what Becc did. I'm going to go a place I haven't gone in a while. Shame on me. I have what I call the email scorecard, and there are 8 elements to a successful email. And one of the most important is the offer to ask ratio. So in every email, you're asking them to do something. That should be the call to action, 30-minute meeting, 15-minute meeting, download this or whatever. What are you offering for that ask? Mm-hmm. So that ask is almost always some level of time. I don't care what you ask them to do. It's still time, right? So what are you offering? And if you can't describe what the offer to ask ratio isn't worth it, then they're not going to give you that time. You're not going to give you your ask. So in this, I have no idea what the ask is, to her point. But then again, the offer is weak. The offer is horrible. Why would I trade anything for what you're offering? So I think that's one a lot of people need to pay more attention to, the offer to ask.
Got you. We have 3 more seconds. Perfect. I missed the sound of that siren after 3 weeks.
I'm gonna buy one of those and like show up to Min's place and just ring it. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Ken.
Yes. Well, anyways, on to the next section, which is
sales mythology.
This is the segment where we demystify common myths in the sales industry. Okay, the first sales myth is all revenue is good revenue. Keenan, would you like to start us off on this?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, all revenue is not good revenue. And it's if it were, we wouldn't have something called profit. Okay? Good revenue is only good revenue to the extent that it drives or leads to profit. So I'm not going to touch the other side. I'm not going to talk about customer service. I'm not going to talk about the customer. The question was revenue. And all revenue is not the same revenue, because some revenue costs more than other revenue to deliver. I remember I had a client early on the consulting, and as we were digging through his customers and digging through, we started to realize that, I forget the numbers, I'm going to make it up, but like 25 or 30% of his customers were below a certain number. And then when you looked at all of the support costs associated with that revenue, and you looked at all of the inbound support tickets and everything, it was losing money. So we finally made it, we purposely raised the price. We came up with a baseline price, purposely raised it, knowing that a lot of people would leave, and then the sales reps could no longer sell a deal less than 10,000. And a lot of people freaked out. They're like, man, but you're going to lose X amount of revenue. We're like, no, we're not going to lose X amount of revenue. We're going to stop losing X amount of profit, because those people are unprofitable. We don't need that revenue. So there you go.
What about you, Becc? What do you think?
Yeah, well, for multiple reasons, no, all revenue is not good revenue if you're viewing it as a CRO. Now, for a seller, is all revenue good revenue? You know, I would argue from the land, it's much better revenue, regardless of how it comes in, because I'm not worried necessarily about retention or retention mainly. But what those two have in common, the CRO and the seller, is the benefit of a long-term relationship is based on you are selling for the right reasons, and that's you're uncovering a problem, and then you're solving the problem with the deployment of the product. So when you see that, you often see like a lifetime relationship start to pan out, and relationship being defined as when they view you as someone who can solve their problems. So the inherent, thing that can flex in the door there is a cross sell within the company, an upsell of pre-existing services, referrals. 87% of buyers are willing to make a referral if a seller just asks for it, especially if you solve the problem for them. So I think that you're leaving a lot of revenue on the table if you book someone for the wrong reasons. And I'm going to be so bold as to say the wrong reasons is any reason other than you've identified a problem and you know how to solve it using your product. So even if it's just because they want it or they need it or, X, Y, and Z, it's the wrong revenue because they're not going to be likely to solve the problem because you haven't even identified it for them. So I'd say not only that, but from the CRO perspective, I'm especially within B2B SaaS, like these are 12-month contracts, right? And so people are off of one bad experience statistically willing to bounce to your competitor, and a bad experience could be, it's not that you didn't get back to them. It's that they didn't accomplish what they wanted to accomplish, with your product. So I would be thinking about, churn. Do they renew? What's the uphill climb there? But if I'm viewing as a CRO, it's, Mark Roberge talks about this a lot in his book, Sales Acceleration Formula, but he talked about what were the pre-indicators for HubSpot users that they had identified that basically they would see value from the product and solving the problem that they were looking to solve. And he said, optimize towards that as a KPI, because for the lifetime of the business, it was more effective essentially. So I would be after that, but I'm certainly not after selling any deals for the wrong reasons outside of solving the problem that they have.
Well, on to the next sales myth, which is I need to have 3 times my quota in my pipeline to meet my quarterly goals. Becc, what do you think?
Oh, I can't defer.
Keenan, we trapped her.
Yes.
You trapped me. You honey trapped me. So I'm going to view pipeline as 2 things. Pipeline as in deals that I'm talking to, and pipeline as in new discovery meetings. I always think it's a great idea to have a lot of pipeline, unless you are your conversion's so low and you'll burn through your TAM with a crappy a sales experience. So from a pipeline perspective, I don't know if I completely disagree with it. I'm always
you're breaking your rule. It's a myth. It cannot be agreed with.
I didn't come up with this one. Here's my view. This is me as a shallow forecaster, though, meaning I always want to have my butt covered. As I'm always thinking about how do I have 4x or 5x just in case. Do I think I need that? No, I don't need that necessarily, but I always do root after it. I think you should focus on conversion from the seller perspective, conversion, which is going to dig in discovery. So I think if you increase discovery, Jocko Vanderkooj talks about this a lot, that basically the handoff across the funnel, instead of thinking about 2xing my overall quota attainment, a lot of people say just double my pipeline, when he found that basically if you just make a 10% increase at each hinge from marketing to sales dev to sales, and sales into customer success, you'll actually see more of a return. So I would be thinking about discovery and how do I convert more based on uncovering problems. However, I always think it's a good idea to have 4x, 5x pipeline just in case.
Do you agree, Keenan? What do you think?
I believe it's a myth, and I believe it's a myth for the simple observation that everybody has a different conversion rate.
Yeah.
So what isn't a myth is that you would better understand what your pipeline coverage needs to be for your own unique individual sales conversion rate. And then secondly, for your corporate, if you're a CRO, what is your general average conversion rate there? But to Beck's point, I think too much time has been spent on focusing at top line. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at it, you've got outreach, you've got sales loft, you've got all the other ones.
Lemless, Yesware, Zane.
Yes. You got all of these ones, and they're all designed to increase top of funnel. Yet, on average, the average conversion rate from qualified opportunity to close is in the teens, if not lower. If you spent more time trying to improve that conversion rate and were able to maintain it, well, pick the random number, 3x, the value there is the return on investment is way higher. Mm-hmm. The amount of money people spend on trying to get stuff into the funnel versus converting what you have in the funnel is a completely missed opportunity. completely missed opportunity. Hint, hint, note, why we bought Noted Analytics, because that's what we're attacking. We're going to attack the conversion rate. But yeah, so no, I think it's a myth, complete myth.
That people focus on, because I have seen an inherent crawl of, before people focus on conversion necessarily, they focus on top of funnel. How many at-bats can I get here versus the quality of how I'm swinging the bat? So why do you think that people do that? Because it's very prevalent.
Yeah, well, because I believe until recently, right, and for most people, they don't even know it, they can do it right now, no one really knows how to improve conversion rate. Because most people, look, with all due respect, Clary's come out and they're trying to solve that problem, right? Mm-hmm. But Clary's trying to solve it by tasks, right? They're trying to solve it by correlation. So how many times has someone logged in the CRM that they talked to John or the buyer? How many times they updated the CRM? How many times have they added a new task to follow? Like they're looking at the activity and what I call the qualifying, the quantitative elements of what a rep is doing, the activity, right? That only correlates. Very few organizations have actually figured out what qualitative data is critical to a deal. And then more importantly, how do I capture that qualitative data? And then how do I evaluate if they have the right qualitative data to determine if the deal is going to close? And that's when they just don't know how to do it, is the bottom line. It's hard and they don't know how to do it, so they default to what's easiest.
Yeah. The only thing I'd add is I think it also is, that's something they're not accountable for necessarily. That can be someone else's fault. It's SDR's fault. It's marketing's fault. But conversion comes down to how good I am as a seller. Added on.
Should be management's. Should be management. Even early. Oh my God! I need to buzz you.
No. It was zero on the clock. It was zero on the clock.
No, it wasn't. It was 0.1. Wait, I'm gonna watch it. Hold on. I'm watching it here on the replay because it's a lag. 3, 2, 1. Oh, he's right. He's right. We have a lag.
Yeah, there's a little lag on the clock.
Okay, I'm gonna keep that in mind.
Yeah. Well, we're on to the next section of this podcast, which is
Take it or leave it.
Now, this is the segment where I introduce common sales tactics, and Becc and Keenan let us know whether they would take it or leave it. Keenan, you're starting us off. Tagging people in your social media posts as a form of outreach. Take it or leave it.
Oh my God. Leave it. Leave it. It's annoying. It's annoying. People tag me all the time. And the worst, not only leaving it, what's even worse is when you tag like 22 people in the comments. you basically just announced that this wasn't for my value. So if you write some blog post and then you tag 30 people in it, you didn't tag me because you thought it was going to be valuable to me. I see right through you. You just tag me with everybody else because you're trying to drive your exposure, your reach in your post. So no. I'm leaving it. 100% leaving it.
Okay, Becc, take it or leave it.
Leave it.
Leave it.
All the reasons Keenan said. Leave it. I think people see it as an upside, and what they're after is engagement, from you. But it's actually kind of an insult to tag a whole bunch of people together, especially when there's like 40 of them. I always put them on mute. But I would say something that is helpful is if you engage with someone's post, if you think it was, relevant, that is a form of a gift to someone as engagement.
Okay, the next one is saying this might not be for you before your pitch. Becc, take it or leave it.
If you believe it, take it. If it's a technique, leave it.
Whoa! That was the most direct, profound, concentrated answer I've ever experienced from Becc. Oh my God, I'm so impressed.
I'm a new Becc.
Oh my goodness.
Marathon Becc is a new girl.
Woo! That was awesome, Becc. And what Becc said, look, I assumed when you asked the question, is it a technique? And the answer is 100% leave it. As a technique, leave it. Here's why. If you have to say, this may not be for you, you just not teleported. What's the word? Give me a word, Becc. Telegraphed. Yeah. You've just telegraphed that you have no fucking clue about my business. So if you're about to sell me something and you don't know why I should need it, then why are you trying to sell me? get your little ass back to the table and start doing a discovery. So the answer is, if it's a technique, 100% leave it. To Beck's point, if it's true, then I guess I'd take it, but I wouldn't even take it then, because I'd say, hey, I know this isn't going to be for you, so I'm canceling the meeting. I don't have any value. I'm sorry. Have a great day. I don't think I can help you. So even in that situation, I wouldn't use it, because I wouldn't go on and talk about anything.
Got you. Now,
it's a game. You can feel it.
It's bullshit. It's manipulation game.
It's a game, and you can feel it.
Yep.
The next take it or leave it is asking your prospects if they think your product is a good fit. Keenan, take it or leave it.
Same thing, right? So the answer is I'm leaving it. Now, and the same thing, if I have to ask you if you think it's a good fit, then I haven't done my work, I haven't done discovery, and I've just wasted your time again. Now, the nuance here, which I do a lot, is I like to ground people what I call a validating question that says, can you see how this fits? After I've showed you a feature or after I shared something, to make sure that how I displayed it, how I articulated it, how I demonstrated it actually translated the way I wanted it. I know it does, but I want to make sure they saw it the way I saw it. But no, I'm leaving that one as well.
Okay, and you, Becc, what? Take it or leave it.
I'll leave it. I'm gonna leave it. I'll sum it up with this. It's like after a doctor's appointment, their expertise is saying, here's the solution. And it's like, hey, do you think that this is the right solution for you? It's like, I don't know.
Good point, Becc. Great point.
Like, now I'm kind of calling into question if you know.
Yeah. Now I'm nervous. I wasn't, but now I am.
We have one last take it or leave it.
Good, Becc. I like this new Becc. She's pointed, on target, profound, like bam. That was really good, Becc, how you did that. That was awesome.
Hey, we only have 23 seconds for the last one, and that is prospecting directly to C-suite executives. Becc, take it or leave it.
Take it.
Take it.
Take it.
Yeah, I'll take it too. It's situational, but absolutely. Sometimes it demands it, other times it doesn't. Does your product serve them directly?
Mm-hmm.
Got you. I know it's a little awkward 3 seconds right here, but there's actually different buttons on here for different sounds. So maybe later in the podcast we can show you the other ones. But on to the next segment, which is
the inbox.
Oh, this is my favorite segment because
it's funny. Take it or leave it's my favorite.
Take it or leave is your favorite. Well, I get to pull out this bad boy right here.
Yes,
the mighty inbox, the mighty mailbox. But let's see who decided to send us a question today. And by the way, this is the segments where Becc and Keenan answer questions from the audience. The very first.
Tell people where they should send theirs. Do we have a hashtag or something?
Yes. Well, we don't have a hashtag. We actually have a Google form sheet where people submit their questions. So in the comments, I'll make sure to send that link. I'll send that link in the comments for the podcast after this, after we're done shooting. But this one is from Carmela Rodriguez from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I am a startup founder and used to conduct all sales myself. However, now that we are growing, I want to build a sales department. What pieces of advice would you give to those building a sales team from the ground up? Becc, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, my biggest piece of advice, or the thing I see going awry, is usually founders start a company because they see a problem in the market, because they have an inherent expertise on the buyer. And so their product knowledge and their knowledge of the buyer and their knowledge of the problem all comes in the box. When they hire sellers, that's not necessarily there, that expertise on the buyer. And I don't think people look for it often enough. And even if the person doesn't have it, like if I don't know CTOs at all, they don't train the buyer, or train the seller to know the buyer. So my biggest piece of advice is to go through an educational process with an ongoing with the sales team of who your buyer is, and translating all of that knowledge, not of your product, but of the buyer that you sell to and the problems that they normally have in the day-to-day to your sales team, because that's going to be critical for them to be able to speak to them with relevance.
And what about you, Keenan? What are your thoughts? What piece of advice would you give?
I really, really like how Becc broke that down and understanding what to lead with, because your inclination is going to want to lead with the product, and that's just not going to work. The second thing I would do, though, is do not hire somebody as a quote-unquote as a CRO or vice president of sales who's going to sell and then turn around and hire people. No, take the idea of a vice president of sales off the table. You don't need that. Find the best, most aggressive, maverick, driven person you can find who's going to just get out there and pound the pavement, who's going to just be relentless and maniacal in attacking it. Mm-hmm. And a plug I got to give to is go read, I always butcher his name, Mark Cosaglo. Is that how I say his last name? Cosaglo? Go read about the last 4 or 5 posts he's written. Some of the best stuff I've read on LinkedIn in the last 3 or 4 years, because he breaks down what it was like for him to be the first rep for outreach and how he did it. So it's one person.
Something I'd add to what Keenan's saying is Challenger did a breakdown at one point of basically low complexity versus high complexity sales. And they knew that in a low complexity sale, meaning not a lot of technical knowledge, you don't have a lot of products, and a shorter sales cycle, a hard worker is number one. And number 2 is lone wolf. But for a higher complexity sale, meaning longer sales cycle, more products, that inherent acumen and knowledge of the market are going to by far be number 1 and 2. Relationship sellers will last in both cases. So I'd say if you're a higher complexity, for sure that I would go after, acumen, knowledge of the buyer, et cetera. But to Keenan's point, in lower complexity, it's going to be about hard work.
And if you can afford it, I understand everybody can, hire 2 at the exact same time.
2.
Not everybody can afford that, but hire 2 at the exact same time. Because if you do a 4-quadrant matrix, I love those damn things, you have a 75% chance of success. Because they both work out, that's a success. Mm-hmm. Or one works out and the other doesn't, that's success. Or the other one works out and the other one doesn't, that's a success. Or they both don't work out, that's a 25% of failure. When you hire just one, now you have a 50-50 chance of failure. So,
interesting. Mm-hmm. That's great advice.
He wanted to make sure we heard him.
Is that all for inbox? That's so sad to me.
Oh, unfortunately we got through the timer a little bit early, or rather.
That was a good one. That was a deep one though, Becc.
It was a deep one. Okay, now on to our next segment, which is
the challenge.
Okay, this is the segment where Becc and Keenan break down a challenging subject within the sales industry. Y'all ready for this topic? The topic for this podcast is how to be seen as credible, how to build trust, build rapport, and be an expert to your buyers. Keenan, why don't you start us off on this one?
Ooh, this is the big one. First and foremost, I think it needs to be said that, and I'll let either one of you argue with me on the number, but I'm going to feel very comfortable and say that 99 and 5 nines, let's pull that shit out of my ass, of salespeople do not position themselves as credible. They know the product, but they do not position themselves as credible. So I'm going to define credibility here. Credibility is the concept that the buyer believes and understands that you have more information and a better understanding of the space and what their options are and how they should move than you do. So therefore, they can rely on you for direction. That's how I'm defining credibility here, is you are perceived as someone that has more information and knowledge than they do, and what they should do and how they should act and how they should respond and what they should build than they do. And therefore, they trust that by engaging in you or relying on you, that they will have a better outcome than if you weren't in the picture. Mm-hmm. So after spending almost 2 minutes on that, I'll come back, but I'll let Becc jump in. But that's the first thing I think we need to define the concept of credibility.
I bet.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I couldn't have said it better myself in terms of credibility. The buyer needs to know or be confident in that you have more information about their situation and their day to day and their life and their problems than they do. If they don't have that, then why would I trust you? Like why would I see you as a credible resource that, like, the definition is that there's credit in there. And the credit is that you have knowledge. You have more knowledge than they do. And the litmus test to me that this is a little awry, and I know we're going to get into some of the other terms here, but this is usually seen as an exercise within sales training that you do at the beginning in the first 2 minutes to 5 minutes of a meeting so that you can set the stage of the rest of the meeting. And it's like, that is a litmus test to me that things are off. It should be a credibility exercise all the way through, from the minute they're talking to you till after they've bought the product, that, like, they believe that you know more information, not only on how to use it, but how to use it to solve their unique problem. So it's all the way across the cycle. Ian, what do you got?
No, 100%. So now we described the importance of in what it is. How do you get it? First and foremost, you have to stop worrying about your product first, and you got to start putting yourself in the shoes of the buyer. So if we want to do a Gary Veeism, you got to have a lot of empathy of where your buyer is sitting. You can't have empathy of where your buyer is sitting if you don't understand where your buyer is sitting. You can't understand where your buyer is sitting unless you either walk a mile in their shoes, which I love when salespeople sell where they used to be in the buyer's seat. Love that. They have that. They understand. But if not, then you got to stop talking to your buyers. So one of the things I've told people to do a million times, I don't know if they actually do it, is go back to someone who's bought your product or service, right? Mm-hmm. And ask them, what was the world like before you bought my product or service? Don't tell me what you wanted to accomplish. Just, what was the world like? What were you struggling with? And get very in tune with that. What were the metrics? What were the problems you were struggling with? How was it impacting the organization? What happens if you hadn't solved it? How long you've been trying to fix it? How frequently did that happen in other jobs? Like, you need to just immerse yourself, 100% immerse yourself into their world, and then do your research around the processes, and in some cases the psychology, or in some places the competing elements in the environment. Just understand the world they live in as deep as possible, so that when they start talking, it'll be clear you understand their world. And then when you add your piece to it of the product, that's where you really stretch it into, oh, I didn't know that, or the bias, oh, I didn't know that. That's fascinating. Tell me more. Becc?
Yeah. So the two pieces of, like, how people can do this is, there's information that you can gather before your conversation with the buyer, and there's information that you need to be after gathering within your conversation with the buyer. But, like, doctors, what they're after, their ammunition. So, like Sherlock Holmes said, data, 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 I can't make bricks without clay. And that's how you should view selling. If I can't make bricks without clay. And the clay is information that you're gathering in the conversation and before the conversation to help you diagnose. So the things that people can research before the conversation is, number one, what are my buyers metriced on? Number two, what are the problems they typically run into as a buyer? Number three, what is their industry about? Number four, what is what's happening to their company and what's their company doing? What are all the external triggers? Number five, what are all the problems that they're running into that I can see from the outside looking in, like they missed their revenue number? But that arms you to go into the conversation. Once you're in the conversation, there's an inherent amount of data that you don't know, that you specifically need your prospective buyer, to understand. You know, like a great example would be, what's the meeting quota? How much are they missing the meeting quota? That's not, from a public perspective, something that you know. How many emails are they sending? How many calls are they sending? What's their open rate? What's their reply rate? All information that you don't know. But, like, I want to transport sellers from being hungry for the close to being hungry to find the problem.
For the open, hungry for the open.
Right, through finding a problem of like, I want more and more and more information, not to open my buyer up so that they trust me.
No, the open to the call, the opening of the call, opening of the opportunity, be an opener, not a closer.
Totally. Of like, I don't want to be aggressive on closing, or you can, but how you do that is through your open by finding the problem of like, I want more and more and more and more and more information, as much as I can get, and the right information to help me diagnose. Like, that's what I'm after in the room. And so the credibility is they'll get to know that in the information that you know before the call, the kinds of questions that you ask during the call, and when you prescribe, do you prescribe correctly? And they're only going to know that after they buy. After they buy. So all those are indicators to your prospective buyer, to Keenan's point, that they should trust you. Not just that you're telling the truth and that you have their back, but that you can do something about it when you do identify the problem.
So I'm going to tell a quick story. It's a long story, so I'm going to try to get really fast. But I was stealing it from Brady. Brady was buying a bike. She was in a bike store. She was listening to the salesperson sell an older gentleman, probably my age, but she called him older gentleman, right? On a particular bike. It's like this enduro mountain bike thing. Doesn't really matter. And he kept asking the woman about levels of comfort, right? Kept asking. And Brady's hearing this as she's doing her thing. And she keeps asking about comfort, 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 comfort. And the sales lady starts pointing him to this particular Euro or enduro type of bike, right? And then Brady finally just can't help herself, which is typical Brady. She goes up to the guy and says, "What do you need this bike for?" And he goes, "Oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm doing this big trail from Mexico to Vancouver. It's called the Pacific Coast Trail or something like that." Mm-hmm. And the minute Brady knew he was riding the Pacific Coast Trail, he looked at the salesman and said, "This bike you just offered him is fit for $1,500 is not going to work." And she said, "But his budget's $2,000. He said, "It does not matter. Bike is not going to work." Why? Because Brady understood what the Pacific Trail was all about, the type of terrain, how it went from Mexico to Vancouver and went as high as like 12,000 feet and then down into the desert. And there's some parts of it that are nowhere close to, what do you call that thing? Civilization. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of away from things for a long, long time, blah, 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 blah. And once the woman knew, the salesperson knew that that's what he wanted to use it for, she's like, "You're right, this isn't going to work." And then once he knew that he only had a budget of $1,500 but knew it wasn't going to work, and then Brady found out, watch this, Brady found out that he'd been saving his whole life to do this. His kids had just gone off to college. This was a lifelong objective. He had gotten a sabbatical from his company.
My gosh.
And she almost sold him a bike that would have broken down halfway through and destroyed the entire experience. When he learned that, he turned around and bought a $9,000 bike. Brady brought credibility to that situation that the fucking salesperson didn't have. And the salesperson almost got a sale, but would have hurt the salesperson, destroyed the man, ruined everything. So that's an example of credibility. I'll leave it. Right. Cool story, isn't it?
Great story. I let you go over a couple seconds. I want to hear the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, the man bought the bike. I have no idea if he went on his journey, blah, blah, blah.
And, well, the question I have on the rant is, when Brady brought all this up, what was the salesperson thinking, behaving? Like, did they feel bad?
That's a great question. And maybe we have Brady on here as a guest one of these. I don't know the answer to that. I never asked her. That's a phenomenal question. I don't know. I just know that she focused on the guy, and the guy was ecstatic that she interrupted.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. And I would bet that the salesperson's like, "Oh my gosh, they didn't mean to do that."
Nope. Yep. They just tried selling what he needed, or what he thought he needed.
That's the responsibility that you have, is like, if they would have known, well, it's your job to know.
Yes. Which goes back to the question we had earlier. I think I was take it or leave it, or one of those, right? Does this fit what you need? Or do you think this is whatever that question you asked, it goes right back to that. That man would have said yes, because he didn't know.
I watched an episode where two sales gurus were going back and forth, and the question was, "Hey, so my partner had done pre-research on this car, and they knew what they wanted coming in to the sales lot. Yeah. Do you think that person, and the salesperson went into a big long garb, And they're like, do you think that that salesperson, you know, should have basically just gotten out of the way and sold her the car? And I was like, this is going to be interesting to hear, because all their partner wanted essentially was just to know if the car, if it was too loud when they were riding on the road. And the other sales guru answers, yes, I think that you should just basically sell.
That's not a sales guru. That's a clown.
Sell.
That's a clown.
Sell
That's a clown.
It was jarring, and my jaw hit the floor.
Yep. Whoever called himself a sales guru when he gave that advice is not a sales guru.
Said, sell it to them and move on with your day. Call it a day. And
That's
the other sales guru goes, yeah, absolutely, because what my buyer, what my partner wanted was just to know that one thing. I'm like, whole nother conversation for a whole nother time, but I absolutely, like, they could have gotten it wrong. Let's say
why did the person want it to be quiet?
Well, let's say that they were like, hey, I want this feature in this car because that will make it more, you know, more quiet is what they're thinking. So they asked for the feature. The person calls it a day and sells it to them.
Yes. What
they didn't know is something else was going to make it loud in that journey. Like something else was going to make it super loud.
Yeah. Good point.
That they would have needed a completely different car. So if you don't challenge that, it's just shocking to me, Keenan. Shocking to me.
Shocking.
Okay, we're on to our last segments of this podcast.
I think I see Beck's rant.
And that last segment is called the rant, which is where Becc and Keenan give us their closing thoughts. Keenan, why don't you start off with this rant today?
Okay. My rant today is fear. I'm going to do a blog post on this. I saw someone, I commented on it, that someone did a funny, hilarious, Shaz is something, I should look him up, did a funny video on using the RFP process in basic everyday sales. So he walked into a print shop, no, not a print shop, a frame shop, right? And where they make frames for pictures, and he had an RFP, and he was trying to sell the guy on the idea of, you know, the RFP concept. He's like, well, let me try. I don't have anything in my budget right now, so let me try this frame. And if I like it, I'll commit to buying more frames down the road. Or he went to a guy, a workout guru, and he said, hey, part of this deal is if we go with you, you'll show us how to do this, but then your IP is ours after the fact, right? So you do all these common RFP bullshit traits that people agree to and go through, and he tried to apply them to everyday businesses, and all the business owners were like, are you high? Buy the food. I'm not giving you free food in terms of if you like it, buy it. If you get your food. If not, get the hell out of here. And what it crystallized and was always known is the reason RFPs work and reason a lot of people get away with the bullshit they get away with is fear. Now, one of those people were afraid to tell him to go pound sand. I'm not going to train you for free to see if you like it. Get the fuck out of here, right? I'm not going to give you a free frame. I'm not going to let you have my IP. I'm not going to cut my price. I'm not going to get out of here. But yet most salespeople and sales organizations don't do that. They're running around scared shitless, 24/7, scared shitless of missing their number, scared shitless of not making their quarterly number, scared shitless of not closing the deal, scared shitless of losing to the competition. And when you play scared, you always lose. Management is afraid of not being able to make the number for the street. Then the manager's afraid they're not going to make their number. They're afraid they're going to get fired. They're afraid of everybody's running around afraid. It's enough. Stop being afraid. We have grown this company year over year on an average of CAGR of 50%, some years 100% growth. And I tell people to go pound sand all the time. We have yearly quotas, but we have no monthly quotas. We have expectations, but no, we don't give away deals because we're afraid. We don't cut pricing because we're afraid. No, beat it. Pound sand, get away. Selling to fear is destroying your organization, and it's way too prevalent. Stop being chicken shits.
Mm-hmm.
Becc, what is your rant for this podcast?
Yeah, well, one comment on his, and then I'll go to my rant. But I think people are afraid. They're like, well, if I don't give them the discount, what if they walk away? And I'm like, well, what you should be more afraid of, in my opinion, is what if you do give them a massive discount and they buy?
Yeah. Yep.
You know, like pick your fear. My rant is oddly enough about the marathon. It was the most formative, best experience for me in my life, and I would say the hardest experience for me in my life.
That's why it was so formative.
It really was. And the thing I would drill it down to was I've got a 25-year heartbreaking history with running, mostly because I would always take out my first lap too fast. I missed a city record by half a second because I took my first lap out too fast. I added an hour to a time in a marathon. And this was my final shot to see if I could do what I thought I could do in my head. The reason it was so formative for me was I think deep down, I thought I might be a fake. That I was saying all these things, of I think I can do this time and I think that I can hit this, blah, 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 but I thought that I might be a fake. And I truly believe that in that marathon, I became maybe someone I always was, maybe someone different entirely. But what it came down to for me is two things. The first is I had a number of excuses, and very valid ones, going into that marathon of why I couldn't break 4 hours. I had just spent 4 weeks sleeping on a bus. I hadn't had very much sleep.
Next to Keenan, which makes it even worse.
I had a number of different ailments with my body going on. It was the hottest marathon in New York marathon history. Like, the front runner collapsed 6 miles from the finish. Like, heartbreaking collapse. It was also the most humid New York marathon. All very valid excuses. Yeah, he stopped to use the restroom and collapsed. Just collapsed. All very valid excuses that I could have taken. And for some reason, when that cannon went off to start, I chose to not. Maybe that was the first time for me doing that, but the esteem builder that was for me, and not taking those excuses, was huge. The second piece for me, and arguably the most important piece that I want people to take away, is I was staying with the 3:45 guy up until mile 24. And the New York Marathon is known as one of the hardest marathons, simply because there's a million spectators and they're all cheering you on. And so you go really fast in the beginning and then you die out near the end, which is my Achilles heel. And I stayed with this 3:45 guy. I slowed down.
Wait, is he like a pacemaker and you know that?
Yeah, he's holding the sign.
Wow. And he's running, so he knows he can do it in that time.
Yes. So they're like trained to basically.
I didn't even know that existed. Look at the credibility. I learned something new.
Totally. 4 hours, 3:55, 3:50. And I was running with the 3:45 guy, which in the beginning feels really slow to you, especially when people are cheering, a million spectators cheering you on, which is my Achilles heel. And I stayed with him. But the most important part was I got to mile 24 and I'm like, I can't stay with him anymore. And normal me, old me, 25 years running history me, would have done it anyway, would have tried to stay with him anyway. And I think that I would have hit mile 25 and I would have had to walk. And I probably would have added 20 minutes to my time having to walk.
Wow.
But I hit 24 and I just thought in my head, I'm like, Becc, just let him go. Just let him go. You know, your body's telling you that you can't stay with him. So I let him go, and I thought in my head, but just don't walk. You can slow down a little bit, but just don't walk. And because of that, I came in at 3:47. It wasn't 3:45, but I couldn't do 3:45. If I had stayed with him, I would have probably come in at 4:05, 4:10, etc. So the point is this. There are certain moments in our life, and they're going to be different for every person, where you have an opportunity to grow and do something that you haven't done before. It's going to be different for every person, and it's going to be an opportunity to not self-sabotage and say, like, I want the best things for me. A lot of times that's saying, I can't do this thing. I need to let this person grow. This is probably my first experience with that, certainly as a runner. And just from an esteem perspective, I want to encourage people, whatever that is for you, that like one day, and it might not be today, might not be a year from now, but one day when you see an opportunity like that, to just try rooting for yourself and listening to what's going on and like making that step forward, even though it might be a step back. You know, in this case, it was for me, of like, just slow down. Of you'd be astonished at what the results can prove. So I know that's a really meaty life lesson, but it was really big for me. So whatever that is for you, like you're listening, I would think, what is that for me? And one day, maybe try doing it and seeing what it can yield. That's my rant.
That was awesome.
That was awesome. So meaty. Oh my
Thank
goodness.
You. Congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
Very exciting. Very, very exciting. Very proud of you.
Thank you very much.
And that's the podcast. Thank y'all so much for joining.
Oh,
I know it's been like...
Sorry, I forgot. This is Keenan.
And this is Becc.
I know. I'm so enthralled in Beck's story. Like I'm still picturing the city of New York and people running everywhere. So you've been listening to Top to Bottom. I am Keenan, your host. And
this is Becc. See you next week.